Good hello friends, my name is Melanie and welcome back to my channel. Changed up the intro on you a little bit there, so that was fun. So today we are going to be going over all of the books that I have read in the month of June. I definitely have a lot of videos, whether it's a reading vlog, whether it's a readathon wrap-up, whatever it may be, with a bunch of these books included, so I'll go ahead and link those as we go, as well as put them in the description bar below. So I read 19 books in the month of June for a total of 5,552 pages, 52 hours, an average rating of 3.4. Hi, that is false information. It was an overall rating of 4.4, not 3.4. I actually had a pretty solid reading month. And I may have bought 14 books. So, I'm glad that is a statistic that I am tracking because it has aggressively gotten bigger and bigger. So, that's a little bit stressful, but it's fine. We are going to jump into all of the books that I read. The first book that I read was The Toll by Neal Shusterman. I technically started this in May, but I finished it in June, which is why I'm including it as the first book of June. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I have a full review for the entire Arc of a Scythe series up on my channel, and I'll go ahead and link it in the cards and in the description like I said I would. I spend like 12 minutes talking about books 1 and 2, and then the rest of the time talking about book 3. So definitely check this out. Up next, I read Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare. This is book 2 in the Dark Artifices, and I listened to this and read this physically, and I have to be honest, if I didn't listen to it, I probably wouldn't have finished it. This is a 700 plus page book, and quite frankly, I'm not as invested in this world to read 700 pages of it for characters that I'm not as invested, you know, like it's just not, I just don't care as much. And I know this hurts a lot of people because the Dark Artifices is like a lot of people's favorites aside from the Infernal Devices obviously, but like I kind of said in some of my other videos, I think this is going to be the last Cassandra Clare book that I pick up, at least that I buy, because I really can't see myself continuing to own more of these series. Granted, I did give this a 4 out of 5 stars. I love the development that we see in the family and in the characters, and I like seeing them grow into their skin more, but I just don't really care for the world anymore. So up next is a book I can't shut up about, and that is The Heartstopper books by Alice Oseman. This is a graphic novel series starting with volume 1, where the line is boy meets boy, boys become friends, boys fall in love. I was actually gifted this by Eric over at Break Even Books, and I've read it digitally, but like having it in my hands is so sweet and so nice, and I already want to reread it and purchase the next 2 volumes because, first of all, like it's so pretty and it's just so cute and I love this story. Definitely a 5 out of 5 stars for volumes 1 through 3, but I think volume 3 is my favorite because of the risks that it takes. I just think that it's so sweet and everybody needs to read this. Up next, I read Foul is Fair by Hannah Capin. This is a Macbeth retelling, and I did not like it. I had this as an arc for like a really long time, and it honestly never really piqued my interest to actually actively pick up. So I ended up reading it the week after it came out to see what people thought, and I just didn't enjoy it. I didn't think it was as angsty as everybody was saying. It wasn't as dark as people were gushing about, so I just was not about it. I gave this a 2.5 and I will not be reading the sequel. So apologies if this looks a little bit different. I had to switch cameras and SD cards, so here we are. We're back talking about the rest of my June reads. The next book that I read was Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. This book was amazing. The plot, the execution, just everything about this book is wonderful. Like there's no real way for me to validate how much I love it more. Listening to it over audiobook was definitely the way to go. Elizabeth Acevedo narrates this, and you'll hear me talk about it in a full audiobook recommendation coming to you very soon. But I love this book with my whole heart, and I will forever listen to any audiobook that Elizabeth Acevedo puts out. 5 out of 5 stars for sure. The next book I've actually already unhauled, and that is The Secrets You Keep by Kate White. This was a mystery thriller, murder mystery. I don't know, it was interesting and like I kind of enjoyed it, and the atmosphere that I read it in definitely made it a little bit more spooky, a little bit more interesting, but The twist or the reveal or whatever you want to call it was lame. The husband was lame, and there was this fire motif the entire time. Like, I woke up from a dream smelling fire and smoke. So like, I still enjoyed it, but it just wasn't good. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm sure that I can read so many better mystery thrillers than whatever this was. The next book I'm very happy to talk about, and that is A Heart So Fierce and Broken, which is book 2 in the Cursebreaker series by Bridget Kemmer. So I can't really tell you what goes on in book 2, but I will introduce book 1 to you. A Curse So Dark and Lonely is a Beauty and the Beast retelling where our main characters, Wren and Harper, are kind of at a mini war with each other, if you will, as Belle and the Beast are. I think in this book, we really get a very close look on Harper and Wren's relationship, which is definitely a main portion of the book. However, someone who is extremely underrated in book 1 is Gray, which is why with book 2, he gets his own little spin-off, and it follows the events obviously in book 1, which is why I really can't say too much. But Gray deserved this book so much. He is an incredible character with such an incredible arc that caught me by surprise. Like, I already loved him, but this book really validated that love for him more. The additional characters that we get in this book are just as fantastic, and once we kind of meet all of them, you really see how the story builds. Though I can't say that book 2 was better than book 1 for me personally, it is still an incredible read, and though I hate where Wren's character ended up going, I'm hoping for a fantastic book 3 to end this trilogy. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I'm going to talk about is The World Doesn't Require You, short stories by Ryan Amilcar Scott. I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars, primarily because I kind of tainted my own enjoyment of this book because I didn't have it in front of me physically. This is an audiobook that I listened to, and I messed up in the sense that I really should have had this book physically in front of me. I need to purchase it. It is such a powerful book. It kind of comes in 3 parts, I believe. It was a little bit hard to keep track of because, like, obviously I'm listening to it, but there were like 3 clear, distinct stories that I can vividly remember. And seeing how these 3 stories, though seemingly separate, come together at the very end was done really well. The final story, the Special Topics in Loneliness class, was so interesting psychologically to explore. I just think, like, this book is so underhyped. Like, there needs to be more hype around this book because it was phenomenal. The narrator of this audiobook has such a beautiful voice. It's just so calming, even though the topics are a little bit harsher. So I definitely think I'm going to be purchasing this, or at least getting it from my library and re-listening to it while following along to it. The next book that I'm going to mention is a book that I didn't actually finish because I didn't exactly get a chance to read it. This was on my June TBR. And quite frankly, the only like book left from my June TBR, and I'll explain what I mean in a second. But it's A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I read like a few pages of this, maybe a chapter or 2, and then my library loan expired, and there are people who have holds on it, so I don't know when I'll be reading this. So maybe it'll be in the future, maybe it won't be, but I'm not considering it a DNF, I'm not considering it a read. I just thought I'd mention it because I started reading it and then my loan expired. The next book that I have to talk about is The Giver by Lois Lowry. So many people read this when they're younger, and I realized that I'd never read it or watched the movie fully. I've seen bits and pieces here and there while it was on TV or something, but I never had to read it for class. So I'm taking a sci-fi and speculative fiction literature and film class, and it is pretty cool so far. I'm really enjoying the reads that we've had. And with The Giver, I think the movie enhances the book. I don't want to say it's better than the book, but it is one of the best adaptations that I've watched in a long time. This was a really pleasant surprise. I love the dynamics between the characters, especially between like the giver and receiver relationship is something that you don't see very often in books. I won't be continuing with the series because I really don't need to. Like, I think The Giver is a really good standalone on its own. Like, you don't need to know what happens after the end of this book. But this would definitely be something that I would recommend to watch the movie, because the movie does a great job, though it does add a couple of things that I don't think were necessarily needed. But I enjoyed the book a lot more than I was expecting to. The next book I'm going to talk about is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. You can see I tabbed this up just a little bit. This was such a beautiful novel. I think seeing how all of the characters interconnect despite the fact that they don't interact until the end is really cool. So we have Marie Lore, I believe is how her name is pronounced. She is blind and is living with her father in Paris, and then we follow Werner, who is an extremely intelligent boy. Man, boy? I don't know, he's younger. He's not a man, but he's not a boy either. I don't know how old he is actually. Anyway, they've both lost an incredible amount of people because of World War II, but they also start to get involved in understanding the war in a way that not a lot of people would. Werner is very smart, and I started to appreciate his character so much more as we move forward. I kind of looked at him as like a little soldier boy before, and then once I like learned his name and registered the kind of person he was, that's when I found myself really starting to enjoy him. With Marie's character, the relationship that she has with her father is so sweet and so important, and it really tells you the heartbreak of World War II in such a great way. And I know that's a terrible way to put it, but truly this is an incredibly beautiful book, and I can't believe it's taken me as long as it has to read it, and I definitely want to reread it some point in the future. My sister actually went ahead and took this from my shelves and put it on hers with obviously my permission, and I'm so excited to see what she thinks of this. And obviously I have all of my tabs for her to kind of refer back to. I annotated this the same way I do with my school books, because I don't think while I was listening to the audiobook, which I listened and read along to this, I don't really want to tab this up too much, but I think upon a second reread that might change. The next two books I'm going to mention are part of the 48-hour queer blackathon that I participated in on Juneteenth. I have an entire vlog for this experience that I will go ahead and link in the cards and the description box below. But the first book that I have to mention is How to Be Remy Cameron by Julian Winters. I have very quickly fallen in love with Julian Winters, his writing, himself as a person. I follow him on Twitter, and I watched a panel that he was on with, oh, this one bookstore, I can't remember. I'll link it down below if there's like a live recording of it. But they did like a huge Q&A section. Julian just had some incredible insights, and just seeing his character reflect in Remy's character as he was talking about this book was incredible. So definitely check out my reading vlog for that, as well as for You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. I really enjoyed this book as well. I feel like I didn't talk about it too much in the reading vlog in terms of my full thoughts, but I wrote my review on Goodreads, and I think Leah Johnson does a great job of really emphasizing a new version of the high school experience, considering the fact that our main characters are going to college, and the fact that scholarships are something that a lot of high school seniors are concerned about. So I think that was beautiful. But then the female-female romance in it, like our two main characters falling in love in the way that they did, is just so beautiful. Go check out that video for more thoughts. Loved both of these books. Gave both of them a 4 out of 5 stars. Finally are the books that I read for the mini magical readathon, and then some bonus ones at the very end after the readathon had finished. The first being Queen of Coin and Whispers by Helen Corcoran. This was not a book that I'd initially picked for the readathon, but I realized that it ended up working for the read a book with less than 10,000 reviews prompt. Because it was an arc that I had that recently released, I read this with Lara from Pugs in My Books, who I will link in the description box down below. Her and I were really discussing the future of the book while we were reading it. I was kind of disappointed with this. I gave this a 3.5 stars. I think I just wanted to like it more than I did, but I think the story is very rich. We have a female-female romance with a queen who is very strong-willed, very strong-powered. She really challenges the norms that we typically see, but especially that are seen in her world. So that was Queen Leah. We have her Whisper Xenia, who is obviously the love interest, who is just so ruthless in like the best way possible, is so cunning, and is so just amazing. I really did. I enjoyed this book, and I love these characters. I just didn't like it as much as I thought I would, which is why I can't give it like a 4 or 5 stars. But I think if you like political intrigue set in a royal setting with a female-female romance, then you'll probably really enjoy this book. I'm just sad that I didn't love it as much as I was expecting to. The next book that I have is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, which is obviously book 1 in the series. I haven't read this for 10 years, which is kind of wild to me. It's weird to think that I read this for the first time when I was 11, and now here I am, you know, 21 years fresh, and and rereading this book and watching the movie. Like, the adaptation is phenomenal. It's so good. I'm not gonna talk too much about this because I will have a video centered around all of the books that I'm reading for my sci-fi and spec fic class, which this was also a part of. So once that comes out, you'll see it, but that's not going to be until like the end of August. So look out for that. But I love The Hunger Games, 5 out of 5 stars, and a great adaptation. Next is Truthwitch by Susan Dennard, which is book 1 in the Witchland series. This was so good. I really liked this upon a second reread. I gave this a 4.5 star rating after bumping it from the 4 star that it was originally. This book follows Safia and Iseult, the Thread sisters, which means that they are binded by an intense thing that happened between the two of them, and so it's like a life for a life, a debt for one another that never really ends up getting like paid off in book 1, but is still equally as important to have throughout the book. I know that's kind of vague, but they're sisters, you know? Safi and Merrick's relationship is interesting. I had a lot of fun with this book. I reread it over audiobook, which is the entire reason I had to reread it in the first place. But like I said in the mini magical readathon vlog, which you hear me talk about this book a lot more, I'll go ahead and link it in the cards. This was really good because I was paying attention to the audiobook a lot more this time around. I'm very excited to read Sightwitch and Windwitch, and as you saw, the second book is on my TBR for July. We're almost done, guys. The next book that I have to talk about is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. It was about time I read this book. This is also included in that vlog, the mini magical readathon vlog, very briefly, but I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I was disappointed that I didn't like it as much. The insta-love that happens towards the end I think was really unnecessary and honestly could have been pushed to book 2. Like, I didn't need that to happen. It didn't drive any of the plot forward. But yeah, it was kind of lackluster for me. And like the fact that I have the Barnes & Noble special edition, sorry. This was okay. However, I do want to get to book 2, though I've heard people say that book 2 is a little bit more disappointing than book 1. So I'm kind of nervous, but I'll get to book 2 eventually. Hopefully it doesn't take me 2 years to read the second book. Alright guys, we have made it to the end. The final book that I listened to in June was The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. This is a 5 out of 5 stars easily. It is a poetry collection that is actually narrated by the author, and we follow Michael as he is learning to love and accept himself in a new way that he didn't realize he was going to. The self-love and the power that goes in this is extremely inspiring, regardless of who you are, regardless of what you identify with. It has some intersectional themes in it. If you've been on my channel for a little bit, then you know I love that word because it's extremely important to speak about. I would probably suggest reading this and listening along to it because it is a poetry collection, and though it is a poetry book and hearing spoken word is incredible, I think you need to follow along with it. So I actually found out that the physical version has illustrations in it, so I was looking forward to when the libraries open back up to go and pick it up and listen to it again. But I really enjoyed this. A great way to end the month. So typically I would end the video here, but I did want to mention something, and that is the Library of the Unwritten and God's Grave. So these 2 books were the last 2 books on my June TBR. You see, like last month I said that the books that I didn't finish last month, I wasn't planning on pushing them over. I ended up pushing them over. So with these, I'm going to be doing the same thing. As you can see, I'm currently reading God's Grave, and I haven't even touched Library of the Unwritten, but these 2 books will be staying on my TBR for the month of July. I'll probably read them at the beginning. Like, I'm obviously reading God's Grave now, so I'm going to continue with that. And it'll probably be one of the first books that I finish in July. But I have already posted my July TBR, so go ahead and check that out to see all of the books that I will be reading this month and to see all of the readathons that I am participating in. With that being said, that is the end of the video. However, I did want to remind you that just because Pride Month is over and just because you don't see the protests on the news anymore, that these are not things that we are still fighting for. A lot of the petitions have reopened cases, and so we are seeing positive change. Granted, it's taking a little bit longer than it should, but if this momentum slows down, then change won't happen. Also, please, please, please remember, we are still in quarantine. COVID is still very active. The amount of people that I know that have recently been diagnosed with COVID is unreal. And it's because they had to go back to work, because people aren't being mindful. So this is my reminder to just be kind to people, be kind to yourself, and be conscious. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on all of my socials, which will be linked in the description down below. And until then, catch you on Instagram.